welcome. I'm excited to have you here. I think most of you know me. I'm Jenna Leveille. I'm the Deputy State Cartographer for Arizona and the AGIC mascot. I just thought it would be interesting for you all to know who else was with you and who registered for the event. So what we found was we had 94 people register, and what we found was that most of them, well, maybe not most, 35%, use AZGeo monthly. Many folks use it weekly. And then there's those diehards like Kasey that use it daily. We have a few folks that have never used it that are joining us today. So welcome to all of you. I hope that you learn some things and you find value in AZGeo and where you might be able to utilize it. And then we had a whole bunch of other, and those responses ranged from a couple times a year to as I need it to I supervise people that do. So it was really good information for us. So these are the folks that are with you today.
Really quick, phone call with workers' comp. I'll be back in like 10 minutes at most. So.
All right. I want to just remind folks as we get started that if you're not speaking, if you could mute, that would be really helpful. And then as far as how people use AZGeo, primarily, so we're like almost at 50%, 49% access AZGeo for authoritative data, which means that our discussion today on metadata and data discoverability is more important than ever, right? If that's the primary use of AZGeo, we really need to be doing that well. A few folks use it for personal projects. 26% use it for their business needs, developing applications, et cetera. We do have a small percentage of folks that use it for collaborative projects, and we're hoping to encourage more of that. And then, of course, our other category that is a whole range of things. But I thought it would be interesting for you all to see who is with you and how people are using AZGeo. I know it's really helpful for me. Kind of as we're getting settled this morning, Eric and I in the planning group really felt like it would be helpful to go through a few Menti questions and get some feedback. So I'm going to go ahead and present this. You all need to go to menti.com. You can see it on my screen here, and I'll put it in the chat. And then you enter the code. Oh, thanks, Eric. I appreciate that. And once you get there, you put in the code 64701185. I'll put that in the chat too, and you'll get to this question. So we're hoping to get some feedback from you. Awesome. Oh, thanks, Eric. Yeah, it looks like folks are getting on. We'll give everybody a few minutes to get into the Menti if you've just joined us, and give us some feedback. Yeah, I would say since, the vast majority of you all are data consumers, you really want to have assurance that the data that you're accessing on AZGeo is authoritative. This discussion is really relevant. I think metadata is really important to ensure that. You're going to learn about the search functionality and the limitations. So that will help you in consuming data for sure. So I'm really glad you've joined us. This is great. All right. We'll give it just one more minute for folks to join in and participate. I think this is just as easy to do on your phone if that's what's easy for you all. If you're just joining us, you need to go to menti.com and put in the code, and we'll put that in the chat again just in case, because I know that if you're just joining, you can't see what was put in before. So there's the code. Oh, I'm sorry, there's the website, and here's the code. All right, so we're going to go ahead and move on to our next slide. So this is a rating function, right? We'd really like to know what your level of satisfaction is as an AZGeo user. It should automatically happen in your browser as you go. We want to know somewhere between not awesome and totally awesome. Where's your satisfaction? Oh, that's great. That's fabulous. Yeah, your input really helps us. So I know it seems kind of high level, but it does make a difference if you give us some feedback. That's great. We'll give you a few more minutes. Looks like overall satisfaction is pretty good with the 30 people that have participated. I think that's great. 4 out of 5 isn't bad. Very cool. One more minute. We'll go on to the next. We don't have very many Mentimeter slides, but we definitely wanted to get some of your feedback right at the beginning and kind of get things rolling. We're going to have some opportunity to be in breakout rooms later on this morning and to give some more specific feedback. So I really appreciate it. All right. So I'm going to go on to the next question. This is always how we can tell if we're doing a good job, right? Would you tell your friends? Would you tell your family about AZGeo? Do you tell your friends? Yeah. Those few that don't know after today, we hope that you do. That's perfect. It looks like an easy question for folks. We're doing something right. So that's awesome. All right. See if I can get to the next slide. So this is a little more specific. Do you use the metadata functionality in AZGeo? Did you know we have it? Awesome. That's what we want to hear. There's metadata in AZGeo? Oh. No, that's not what I want to see. You should all know there's metadata in AZGeo. We have a whole page dedicated.
Oh, my goodness.
That number will change after this meeting.
Yeah, I hope so. All right. We're pretty even, folks. I suppose if you count the no's and there's metadata in AZGeo together, we're not doing so well. We need to have the conversation that we're having this morning. So that's good. Okay. So this is an open-ended question. And you're going to have more opportunity later today to give us some more feedback, but we want to know what you all need. What can we do better? How can we support your business needs? What does AZGeo need to do? Well, yeah, we're sure of that. So give us your ideas. Anything is good. So I assume the ease of use comment is better functionality, right? Easier to use than it is now. Not sure yet. That's fair. Perfect. The quarterly training on content and use. We do have regular training, so I think that supports our ideas. This should, yeah. Awesome. Yeah, we can talk about how you can use AZGeo to collaborate. Not sure is just fine. Yep, I agree. Stale data, that's an ongoing challenge. I'd love to hear ideas about the FAQ section and our help. For those that don't know, we do have a whole page dedicated to help. So feedback on that and what we can do better is really, really helpful. Yeah, I agree. Better collaboration with agencies with similar tags. You all are going to learn more about that later today. Yeah, how do we get more general Arizona public involved? I think that's a good point. Oh, Kasey can help with the person that mentioned integrating my agency's open data with AZGeo. We do have a workflow for that, and Kasey handles that all the time. All right. Very good. So I think we're about done, and I'm going to stop sharing. All right. So we're going to kick it off with a discussion on metadata. And I think all of you, I hope all of you are aware that Kasey Green is our AZGeo data curator, and he's joined us today to give an overview of the metadata functionality in AZGeo and some best practices. Kasey, I need to make you a presenter. I assume you have your slide deck?
Yes, I do.
Excellent. So you should be able to present. We will have a section at the very end, a few minutes, so that we can talk about your challenges, and we'll get everybody to come off mute at that time. So I'll hand it off to you, Kasey.
Good morning, everyone, and I'm here to talk about am I still muted? My goodness. Okay, is that better?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, all right. So I'm here to talk about metadata, the exciting topic, and as you can see, I have a little graphic because I love little cartoon pictures and all that kind of stuff. And if you're a data creator, just remember that your metadata is pointing right back to you. So let's go over a little bit about metadata. What is metadata? Why is it important? And I'm sure people have looked at this and seen this, so I'm just you may have heard this before, but metadata is information about data, your data. And I'll kind of look at this like a reporter, like an old school reporter, where you need to either share the who, what, when, where, how, and why of the data resource. In geospatial data, it's about our maps and our files that we create, imagery. So it's very important to share that information so people can use your information. Metadata makes it easier to find on AZGeo. So if you have metadata in there, someone needs to search, or your data or someone else, or data that you put up on AZGeo, it's definitely better to be concise in your metadata. For people who are using data, AZGeo users need to understand how the data is structured, definition and terms used, how it's collected, and how it should be used. All those things are important for the end user. So you're doing metadata is something you're doing for others who's consuming your data. So we have to be mindful when we put up data to AZGeo, or when we're, for the public to use. Reusing data. AZGeo users often want to reuse data collected from another project or from their own project. And we share and collaborate, and it's always better to have concise data and know where you can use, and know that the data that you're using is credible. I think it's a trust issue. It's a trust thing. People want to be able to trust the data on AZGeo. They want to understand it. They want to be able to, if they have to explain it to someone else, they want to be able to do that without having to search out the data or put more time and effort and looking for the documentation regarding the data. So that's why it's important. And I hope that through this presentation, people can really understand, hey, I need to put a little bit more effort in my metadata. So AZGeo has metadata standards. If you haven't been to the page, I put the link here. And if Jenna, if you like, could you post that link in the chat? What we're looking for is a descriptive name. Okay, if you have the data that you created, make sure that you name it correctly. The purpose of the data and the intended uses. Data creation methodologies, processing, and oversight. If you have any errors in the data, make that known, and also for qualification. Everyone wants to use a complete data set. So if it's incomplete, you shouldn't put it up there to AZG. You shouldn't put it out there for the public to consume. Limitations of use and whether or not how it can be distributed, that's very important. The dates. Everybody, I saw in the Menti that people want updated data. Well, people want to know when your data was created, when it's been updated. Those things are so important. AZGeo pretty much handles a little bit of that for you. Once you it really just when you upload it, it puts the date in there. But we also want to know when it was collected. So it's very important to put that information in. Contacts. A lot of people forget this. I look at metadata on AZGeo all the time, and there's some things that people may want to contact the data creator for, and it may not be on the website, or in the data source. It's very important to put that in. Some people may have questions. Credit. Make sure that you credit the data. Projections and coordinate systems. AZGeo is pretty much changes coordinate systems WGS, but I think in rare cases, if it's a zip file or something like that, you may want to make sure you have the correct projection or coordinate system. And tags. We're going to talk about that more. Tags are very important because that's how AZGeo organizes the data, and searches are often dependent on tags. And so be mindful when you're tagging data. If something is a tag used in your organization or your business, it may not be used in the public, or it's maybe specific to you. So when you're uploading data and putting it on AZGeo, just think about that. Maybe browse around and look up other similar data sets that may share some tags. You may be able to find the tag that you're looking for. So, and we'll cover that more today, but I just wanted to just put an emphasis on that. Attribute information, and a lot of us are GIS professionals, that, but it's always good to bring it to your attention. Hey, we need all those things. And I know it's tedious and it's cumbersome at times, but it's in the long run, it'll save you a lot of grief. The next slide is an example of, I think, a really good example of someone who really took the time and made sure that their metadata was filled out and up to the standards that AZGeo has presented. They have a descriptive name. They have dates. As you can see, they have the purpose of the data and the intended use. They have just a great description of it, data creation, methodologies, processing, oversight, all these things. I think Wolfgang is on the call. This is his data set from DFFM. I just thought, as I looked to find an example, I thought this was a great data set. And as you can see, AZGeo also, the hub has a way to show your data set score for information. And as you can see, it's green. To go to the next part, it has the completeness for terms of use, limitations, and distribution. It has tags. Look at all the tags that he put in. And then he has his credits. I mean, I just thought this data set was just well put together. Only one thing that I saw that there was a problem on it, just one little thing. There's no direct contact information on the data set. So if I was to be a stickler and say, you didn't put a contact on here. I mean, Wolfgang, I'm sure you're going to go back and do it after this presentation, but that's the only thing. But besides all that, this is how data should look on AZGeo. And a lot of times we think about it, hey, AZGeo, the metadata is messed up. Well, that's on you, the users, the people who's putting up the data. So we want to help. That's why we created the metadata page. That's why we have this forum, so people can help you better understand the importance of metadata. So what can I do? Make sure your data is compliant with AZGeo metadata standards. Become an ambassador for metadata on AZGeo. Explain the importance of metadata. Refer data creators to AZGeo's metadata page. Contact this group for ideas and thoughts on how we can improve AZGeo metadata. This is a collective effort. That's it for my presentation. If you have any questions or anything I can help you with, here's my contact information. I'm excited to improve metadata. I'm passionate about it. I look at it quite often, and I can't go in and fix it because that's on the users. So I'm here to help them. Thank you.
That was great. And I think that, that was the important information that we want to share with everyone, right? You did a great job. So we do have one question in the chat. Veronica from DWR added that Esri recently logged a bug with the ArcGIS Hub where the metadata we publish with a service gets wiped when you download the data from Hub as a shape file. Has anyone noticed this happening with AZGeo? Kasey, do you know if we've had any feedback about that?
I haven't had any feedback, but now that I'm aware of it, I'm going to look at that, and actually I'm going to download that and see, Veronica, what's happening. And Jenna, we do contact and talk to Esri all the time, and that's something that we need to probably bring up to our contacts and see if it's been fixed or they have a plan on working on it.
Yeah, and it probably would help us if anybody on the call has experienced this, if you could put that in the chat that you have had that experience so that we can provide more information to Esri. That's helpful. All right. Well, thank you, Kasey. We do have Steve Whitney from Pima County. He's the GIS manager there, who's going to talk to us about their methods in Pima County and in putting their metadata together. They're kind of our star child. So Steve, I have made you presenter. If you want to go ahead and present your slides.
Thanks, Jenna. Good morning, everybody. So I don't know if I'd consider these best practices or not. This is just how we did it. So take it for what it's worth. So our metadata system in Pima County is an in-house developed system, and it's somewhat old school in that when we developed this, that was in the late 90s. So there wasn't a whole lot of metadata standards out there to follow. Really the only, the main one was FGDC metadata. Anybody that's been around long enough to remember when FGDC metadata first came out, it was really ugly and not fun to work with. So we basically said, we're not doing that. I think another standard, I think ASPRS at that time had a metadata standard out there as well, but that was more attuned towards remote sensing products. So we basically developed our own in-house system, just asking ourselves, what do people need to know about a given GIS layer, and just kind of take it from there. So on this slide, this is just how you get to our metadata. So this is the system that we use both in-house and provide for public use as well. So some of the highlights is we provide tools for searching and discovering. There's interactive entry that you can enter a keyword and it'll bring up the list of layers that have that keyword in them. We also have some canned queries that you can utilize to look at our GIS layers and get to the metadata for our GIS layers, and that's all these different choices here that you can pick by. We also include imagery. We have an awful lot of imagery, and it really helps to have metadata developed for all that imagery so that we internally can keep track of it all, and externally customers can see what we have available for imagery as well. So this is just highlighting some of the stuff Kasey pointed out in terms of what's really important for people to know: a descriptive name, an abstract, which kind of gets at the purpose of this layer and gives you an idea of what it could be used for. Known errors and qualifications are always really important for a lot of those gotcha type situations within specific GIS layers. We've got the projection included. You'll see a whole lot of other stuff in here. It may be considered overkill in some cases, depending on the customer, but I guess we figure more information is better than less. So moving on, we do have field metadata included and source information and a source contact. So this, we kind of divide up the contact portion in between the source of the data. A lot of times that's the same if we've developed it internally. Other times if we're hosting other organizations' data, such as the City of Tucson's data, then this is what this area is used for, to give some information about where we got this data from if it wasn't developed in-house. Date of last update is always important as part of those core pieces of information that you want to provide. Lineage, in our case, gets somewhat at the maintenance description, or at least gives you an idea of how it gets updated. And then maintenance description is where we can lay out how this layer is maintained, if there's any additional information in terms of, do we join other data to it? Is this a derivative layer from another layer? Things like that can be important for the customer to know about as well. And then this is our internal or primary contact information in terms of who within our team you can contact specifically with questions about this layer. And then we also provide a general email address that people can use to just send general questions to as well. So that's turned out to be pretty handy and pretty well used too. So this is more of an old school approach. It's all web-based. It's all run by Cold Fusion, which we have on our long list of things to do to migrate from Cold Fusion into something, I don't know if you'd call it more standardized or not, but we're kind of looking within our IT department to see what kind of standards they may be using for development these days, something like .NET or something like that, but we'll see where that goes. So that's really, in a nutshell, kind of a broad overview of our metadata system in Pima County and how it was developed here. What I want to talk about next is one of our fairly recent enhancements to our metadata system is including web service metadata. So we have an awful lot of business systems and web mapping applications and other types of applications that use web services that are published from our GIS data. So this was our attempt to create metadata for web services. So right off the main metadata, at the very bottom, you can get at what we've got termed as ArcGIS/GeoCortex service layers. GeoCortex is the middleware that we use to power our primary web mapping application, which is Pima Maps. You can get to that, and then this gives a summary of what systems are consuming a web service. So we're using our parcel layer as the example here. So we can quickly see in the left column what ArcGIS server systems are using it. Open Data, Pima Maps is using it twice. And then VEC 911 is also consuming this. In the right-hand column, this summarizes the types of services between all types, primary, alternate services. That kind of gets at, as we all know, you can publish multiple services from the same layer, and those services can have differences between them in terms of what's included. maybe how it's symbolized, maybe how some of the different specifications are set, such as scale dependencies and things like that. So this gives a quick summary and a way to get at all that service type. Following along, what we did was pick the open data. So we're looking at how this service is set up for open data. And so the ArcGIS server system, that's telling us it's the open data. And then these links will link right to the different level of the service's REST endpoint. So people can get at the various details that they may need to know about this web service for preparing their system to consume it. And then the ArcGIS service path link takes you to the service's full list of layers that's included in that service. So we include multiple layers per service when we're publishing web services. So a good recommendation and what we try and do is we try and link to our metadata wherever we can. So we've got this great system set up through our web pages. So we're able to fairly easily link to it from different applications. So from Pima Maps, any layer within Pima Maps, you can get to the metadata on our open data portal. We include a link right to the metadata as well. That's really, when you have a system like this built in place, take advantage of it and link to it wherever you can from all your applications and business systems. So if people need that information behind what they're looking at on the map, it's easily accessible to them. And so I think that's it. So if there's any questions, happy to entertain those now.
Thanks, Steve. That was super helpful. We just had one question in the chat, and I think I answered it. Shauna Ray wanted to know if someone needed access to download the Pima County data. I shared that it's all open now. So
yep,
we want everyone to be like Pima County.
Yeah, so and that's a good point too, because it was super easy to set up that pass-through, so to speak, on AZGeo. So if anybody's looking for Pima County data, it shoots them right to our open data portal and off they go.
Excellent. All right, so we have a few minutes before our next section. I would love it if some of you would turn on your videos and come off mute and share with us what your challenges are with metadata. What's the pain points, and how can we help through AZGeo to make that a little easier? Do we need workshops? What do we need to make that easier? Because that's really one of the ways that we're going to have success, right? And less frustration for you all if the metadata is good and you know what to use the data for. So I'll hush for a second. What do you guys think?
So I'll go first, Jenna. I know one of the challenges that I have is standardized tags. I think that's a common theme across the spectrum of everyone that utilizes ArcGIS Online and Open Data Hub to an extent, but coming up with a workflow and process to standardize and create, that authoritative list of tags that we want to use, as opposed to just throwing, anything out there like we call it the Wild West of tags. That's
right.
One of the pain points I know that I have personally on my end.
Yeah, I think that's pretty common. I agree that we need to come up with a workflow or a methodology, at least for our users, to be able to figure out what that is, so that it isn't the Wild West. It currently is. All right. So there is a question in the chat. How do we get surveyors to understand that people do in fact read metadata? Well, from our survey earlier, Jesse, it doesn't look like people do. Holy cow. But yes, we want people to read metadata. So I think we keep talking about it, right? We talk to our cadastral folks, we talk to our friends in the survey community. My guess is that those in the survey community that have one leg in GIS do appreciate that. And they do know that people read metadata. What else, folks? Do you want to share what your pain points are or, helpful tips? Yeah, go ahead, Phil.
Yeah, thanks for putting this together and great content. I know that one of our challenges at FEMA as we work on recovery is we pull data from a lot of agencies, and what we're trying to build in Experience is actually a toolkit where we can put this metadata, if you will, in terms of the data sets and tagging the data sets to how they're labeled and coming up with some standard set of tags is going to be really useful, because we're hoping to kind of create a filtering capability. As I'm interested, let's say, in public health data, I'm interested in schools, I'm interested in children, and then it would kind of filter the data based on the tags. So I could end up looking, and one of the things we're focused on is how are we doing before COVID, during COVID, and as we're recovering from COVID in terms of what data has to say, what data is available. And so you can kind of see there's a bunch going on there, the length of time the data has been compiled. I think I saw that in your metadata, maybe a start date when the data set got started, but that's kind of what we're doing. And I just throw that out there that it's something I'm thinking our group is thinking a lot about, and it might be something you guys have been working on too. Thanks.
Thanks, Phil. Yeah, I think that's really helpful to know, right? Part of how we're going to come up with that list that everybody can use, and maybe we post that to AZGeo. I'm not quite sure what our path forward is, but part of that is talking to folks like you, right, that are already using the data and have a need and see what the need is. So I think we need to keep the discussion going. I appreciate that. Patrick, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. And I'll echo the sentiments of Phil that this is just an amazing time, you guys. So thanks so much for all the interaction. I think from my perspective, as far as metadata is concerned, is it's sometimes not considered the most exciting part of what we do, but it's incredibly important. So continuing to do the outreach to data owners or contributors that haven't put metadata on to help encourage them to get that into AZGeo would be fantastic. I think another thing is ensuring that you have your data latency information clearly documented. Everyone's data updates in a different time frame. The data that my team has updates every 12 months, but it's not official until 6 months after that calendar year. So there's like an 18-month turnaround in when that data can truly be used, and that's something that needs to be documented. And then lastly, one of the things that I've been encouraging my team to add into the metadata has been proper use cases of the data. It's not uncommon where we put all of our data out to external customers through AZGeo, and then people use that data for decision making, which is what we want, but it also creates challenges because maybe someone's not using the right data set for the right type of analysis. And so how do we get people to, how do we document those things to make sure that people find the right data and then use it for the right purposes?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Patrick. And I think you all are a good example, right? We're working on it. I think it continues to be a challenge.
Yes.
Sage, it looks like your hand is up.
Yeah. One of the things that Patrick was getting at there with the use cases too is standardized naming, and I won't take credit for this because this was really Jenna and Kasey that made us do this, but all of our data is named very specifically for our database, but as a common user that's just looking for speed limit data, all these other random ADOT, LRSE underscore speed limit makes absolute no sense. So one of the things that I think we've found success with this year with uploading our AZGeo data is naming them actual human names. And I think that's a pretty big one too. That's been nice. So people actually know what to use them for because the names make sense. So.
Yep, I agree. I think that sometimes we get in our own bubble, right? and we think everybody knows what we know, and that's rarely the case.
Exactly.
So I think it's important to think about your end user, right? What are they experiencing, and where could they find challenges in finding your data when that's the data they need to make a decision? So I think it's important to think about that.
That's funny
Go ahead,
because
Kasey.
that's funny because Jenna, I was looking at ADOT data and I was, I said, Jenna, I know I'm new to this. What does all this mean? I don't know what this means. I need help. I thought it was me being in my ignorance. She says,
No, we also,
I think we need a meeting with ADOT.
it's been great. We also connected a bunch of story maps that we had that was a little bit of metadata and a little bit of high level information about what the data item is. We chucked that into all of our metadata as well. And so for stuff like traffic count data, I think that's been useful. But yeah,
that's a great idea.
Yeah.
We have one more question in the chat, and then we'll need to switch gears and get to a discussion on data discoverability. But Veronica, I'm going to read it really quick. What she put was, this might not be strictly related to AZGeo, but data in general, and I think that that's valid. They've been working in DWR to establish data owners for each of the layers in their enterprise geodatabase. So she's considering listing the data owner name, or at least their job title, in the metadata for each layer. Has anyone else done something like this? Is this an appropriate use of the metadata, or could this create confusion for data customers? Do you guys have feedback for Veronica?
That's just Steve and I responded in the chat, but yeah, I mean, that's kind of what we were getting at our contact within our metadata for each layer. It's like, you got a question about that layer, who can you contact that knows the most about that layer? So yeah, it's super helpful. The only drawback is you have to keep track of staff turnover because a lot of our contacts in our metadata aren't working here anymore. So yeah, it goes back to, yeah, it's great to create metadata, but don't forget about maintaining it.
Agreed. There were lots of responses to Veronica, so that's awesome. Thanks, guys. Good discussion. So we're going to switch gears a little bit to try and stay on our timeline for the agenda, or at least close. Shea Lemar and I, it's mostly going to be Shea, are going to talk to you about the current state of AZGeo and what its functionality is, what its limitations are, and how you can best discover data in AZGeo. So Shea, do you want to take it away?
Okay, so I think the discussions that we're having are some of the most valuable parts, so I'm going to fly through the slides. I was asked to discuss data discoverability, specifically focusing on how to find the data that you need, and then a focus on tags, and we're going to have Patrick Whiteford from ADOT talk about best practices. They really did amazing things with their tagging. So let's dive in. So when you want to discover data on AZGeo, I'm guessing a lot of you know this already, but we'll run quickly through it just in case. We have, if you go to the data tab, then you'll see the AZGeo data. And if you scroll down, there are two main differences between searching for data. You can go to the AZGeo Hub Data Gallery, and that will take you to the Hub site. And in that Hub site, you can search, if you're signed in, all of the data that your user can access. So that's all of the open data, as well as any data layers that you can access through groups that you're a part of. Or you can, within this site, search all of the open data. So I'm going to quickly take you through two of them. If you want to do the data gallery search, again, you click on the AZGeo Hub Data Gallery button, and when you click on that, it will bring you to the Hub site set up for AZGeo, and you'll know it because it says Gallery for AZGeo Data Hub. And once you get there, you can type in search terms like we're used to, and you can use the filters to say, I only want to search for services or applications. And we will go through that as well. Notice in this particular one, I am not signed in. So, for instance, when I first go there, it just on the right-hand side lists all of the data that I have access to. And if I type fiber, then there is no data, open data accessible for AZGeo Data Hub focusing on fiber. However, once I signed in as Lemar AZGeo, now, because that username, there's no open data available dealing with fiber, but that username is part of groups that has that information. Now, when I search the data, I get quite a few more because I'm in groups that share that data. So one of the main things, again, I wanted to show you was the difference when, in fact, and let's just hang on, tab on through. So again, you go to data, and if you want to search through the data hub, you come here, it automatically takes you there. You can search for data. I only want data layers having to do with roads. You know, you can search, you can change your setup, and then if you sign in, you'll get access to all of the data shared with your user. Okay. And again, you can do the filters. I utilize the filters a lot to narrow down to get to the specific information I want. More often than not, though, I'm searching the open data. So if you do this main search, it'll say Explore AZGeo Open Data. And actually, let's come back here one more time. And when you go data to data, before you type in your search term, it will tell you, here you're searching the open data, here you're searching the data gallery. So you can either go to individual categories or you can search for a word. I typed road, and when I typed road, I got this back. Now, this is a challenge that I find with AZGeo, and I find it with every good data hub. There is so much fantastic data out there that I wanted major roads for Arizona. So I typed road, and I got 334 results. That is a lot of results for me. So I've really learned to take advantage of the filters. I mean, I could search through all 334, and actually a lot of times the ones I want do tend to float to the top, but they don't always. So because we have a variety of authoritative data, open data being brought into AZGeo, for instance, I probably don't want something hosted by HIFLD. It's valid, it's just not something that I need in my search. So to narrow down my search anymore, again, I take a lot of advantage of these filters on the left. So for instance, I almost always immediately narrow it down to the source I want. I want it from AZGeo or Pima County or MAG. That's really going to help me get rid of the things that are incredibly valuable but not specific to the search I need right now. And then I utilize the tags as well. I utilize, I'm probably going to want something from ADOT. Immediately by saying, hey, I want roads, but just tell me the things with the source of AZGeo Data Hub and tag of ADOT, I knocked it down to 55. And again, the ones you most likely want float to the top, but this is what's incredibly helpful for me. So narrowing it down by source and tags and dates is very valuable. And then back to the tags, we wanted to have a little bit of a discussion on the tags. So keep in mind, tags are required when anyone uploads data. And when people become data contributors, we created documentation that tells you the really, really excellent practices on how to give a good title, how to give good tags. So my first recommendation would be for data contributors to please read that. It's incredibly valuable. We can write all the documentation we want, but if people don't read it before they upload their data, there's not a lot we can do. We feel that tags are one of the most valuable ways to help people find your data. So keep in mind, have your tag representing the agency that maintains the data for each data layer. Again, you saw that I had roads, and then I added ADOT as a tag to help me narrow down, because a lot of times I know the group that I think has the authoritative data I need. And what Sage was saying is think about what the layperson is going to search for. They're going to search for the word roads, not collectors, HPMIS. I'm sure I slaughtered that acronym. I don't know what they are. So doing that in itself, both in the tags and the title, are incredibly valuable. Keep in mind that Hub is set up to search. When someone does a search, it searches the tags, the title, the categories, and the description fields. So on the bright side, you don't need to duplicate any words from your description or title in your tags. However, since people utilize tags for their searching, I've noticed a lot of things come in. Maybe they use the word city in their description. So when I search for city, it will pop up anything that has the word city in the description. So if I'm actually publishing cities, having a city name in the tag would be valuable. And again, it's very helpful that your titles, and we put this in the documentation, include your geographic area, the feature that you're publishing, and the year. Challenges we've noticed with tags, as we can tell from our discussion, it's a challenge to, you have massive amounts of data, and finding an easy way to read people's mind when they type 2 words in a search. I mean, Google can tell you that's not an easy thing to do. So once we've noticed too little information in your tags, don't just put ASU as a tag. It's helpful, but other information as well. Again, tags that are too technical, cadastral, that's a good one when you're dealing with some people. Other people might just want to search for the word township or section. And the phrases must match completely. So if you type long phrases in, for instance, incorporated city boundaries, and I search for city, it's not going to work. So if you did incorporated city boundaries as a single tag, that's a challenge. Keep that in mind as well. So I'm going to pass it to Patrick to discuss how they really stepped up their tag game, and then hopefully we'll have time for comments and suggestions and a discussion.
Thank you, Shea. I will start sharing. Let's see.
You should be able to, Patrick. Thanks, Shea. That was excellent.
Yes, it was. All right. Thank you for the opportunity. So I'm Patrick Whiteford. I'm the GIS Group Manager within the Planning Division at ADOT, and I'm going to be talking about the data discoverability and as an ADOT experience. So I kind of want to take you guys on a journey or a quest, if you will, for data, for good quality data. And with any good, quest, you got to have a story related to it, right? So when it comes to trying to discover data, what we were trying to do, it was prior to AZGeo, it was truly the dark ages of trying to find data, and we're always searching for the holy grail of data. Prior to AZGeo, everything was decentralized. What I mean by that was if you needed data from ADEQ, you had to go to their website, hope they had their data hosted somewhere, or hope that you had a contact within ADEQ. Same thing if you needed it for ADOT or state land or any other state agency. It required extensive research and it was highly time consuming. And again, there was no centralized data hub. And so the idea of a single data hub such as AZGeo was just simply inconceivable, you guys. Once AZGeo got up and running, and we put the community really put a lot of time into thinking about how can we not only encourage people to share data, but how do we improve the ability for people to find data? So with that came a lot of best practices and this is something that we talked a lot about extensively within ADOT. And when we first started sharing data out on AZGeo, we were naming them based on how we name our data within our database. And the name that you see there in that naming convention, LRS, ATIS routes, ATIS routes is our official name for our route network. It's basically all the roads within the state, but people simply could not find it. And we were hosting all this data, but people kept coming, requesters kept coming to us saying, hey, we can't find this information. And so what we learned from just that experience was we really need to consider the audience and dumb down the way we name the information, okay? And that's, dumbing down, you can use that as a technical term. So in other words, don't use internal verbiage always consider your audience. We know the nuances of our data, but many of our audience members do not. So always be considerate of that. The other thing to consider was adding in organizational and category information. What I mean by that is when you add that information in, it helps to improve the searchability by the different type of information. So you can add in a category of like transportation or organization of DOT, and that's going to help streamline, just like what Shea said, streamline that information for the ease of searchability. So here's an example of just like the data discoverability and descriptions. This is an example of the All Roads Network for 2020. So we changed it from ADOT routes to All Roads Network, and then we actually added in the date that it was official, because every year this data gets updated. In a few months, when the 2021 data is available, we're going to post that with the same name, just with the updated tags for now 2021. And when you add that descriptive information, it allows the customer or the requester to find information by specific category, in this case, transportation. Same thing revolves around metadata. Metadata, the data about the data. It's incredibly important to fill this information in. It really helps us to describe the update cycle of the data, as well as any particular use constraints. So we worked with our risk management team to develop our own data disclaimer and put it up onto our metadata to ensure folks understood, hey, this is what the intended use of this information is. Please don't use it for X, Y, and Z. We tried not to, we didn't want to go into super detail about what not to use the information for, just because there's any number of scenarios where that could happen, but more just best practices about here's what you want this data should be intended to be used for. We also have the ability within AZGeo to then extract it out as an XML, and then you can use that for any other metadata programs. So then, as far as just best practices, this for us in ADOT, this is going to be very much of an ongoing thing. It's metadata and best practices. It's a journey, not so much of a destination, because it's going to be something we're constantly be learning about. But the biggest thing that we learned was really using thematic-based information. So whether it's transportation or a different name of our federal report, really putting that information into the metadata and to your tags was incredibly important. Spelling out your acronyms. Just as Shea said, HPMS, not everyone knows what that is. So spell that out, help people understand what that is. And then associate it with potentially with things like a story map to help explain and get a little bit more into the weeds on things. Use your common language and add descriptive information to it. And prepare your data as much as you can. One of the things that we did was we did a lot of data reduction. What I mean by that is there were a lot of columns in our data that were really only used for our specific uses for things like data quality control or data assurances. And so we took all that information out. So that way, the only information that was attribution in the data was the information that the customer was going to need. And that way we wouldn't create any undue confusion. And then lastly, data tagging. So again, we want to develop a naming convention related to this. And so we tried to make sure we spelled out our acronyms. We used our common terms such as road network or routes or highways or state highway system. But then we also added in, Arnold, which refers to the federal report that it supports. We added in our own nomenclature for ADIS, which is how we name things. And then we added information about what year that specific data set was being used for. That way people could search for a whole lot easier. And that's really the goal here, was really to help improve data discoverability. And again, this is something that's going to be something we're going to constantly be learning and improving upon. So with that, I'll open it up to questions. Jenna, can you tell me if there's any questions in the chat?
There isn't any specific questions for you, Patrick, but there is good discussion about, how people go about making it better. How do we simplify it a little bit? And I think that's a key. I think you've given everybody some really good ideas. I appreciate that. I think that's awesome. Does anybody else have any questions for Patrick before we move on to our next thing?
Thanks, everybody.
So Patrick, there is one question from Chris. For the purpose of making tags effective, is it worth making semi-duplicative tags such as road and roads? Is it worth doing that, or does that complicate it?
I think I don't know the specifics if you were to type road would it also find roads, but for me I think that probably would be duplicative. But Sage, do you happen to know, or would anybody else know? Because that's a good question. I don't know that nuance.
Shea or Kasey?
I don't know for sure, but we will find out and we'll let you know which one works best, because you're correct. You want him to get both, but we don't want 12 pages of tags.
Yeah, Andrew.
Right.
So to Andrew's point, we've got roads and highways. Roads was more the generic, streets, roads. Roads and highways is actually the name of the Esri tool that we use to manage the data. So that's why we put roads and highways in there.
Hey,
Thanks, Patrick.
this is Andrew.
Go ahead, Andrew.
One of the things that, not necessarily related to our geospatial data or AZGeo, but just in general, there's a lot of a movement away from metadata keyword tagging towards just general full text type search. So the ability to look, within abstract or just maybe within the features itself for certain keys. The other possibility also being to create what we call word to vector diagrams. So you get sort of a similarity of it knows roads and streets have some relationship, right? That can empower search. And I don't know what the plan is longer term to move towards that, but I think that potentially makes the burden easier, because then there's less need even for that kind of broad redundancy of stuff.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Andrew. And I can't speak to what Esri is planning on doing in the future with their searching, but we do meet with their search team and have in the past. So I think we can share that as a suggestion, because so far you have to be very specific in what you put in and how the functionality works in an Esri product like AZGeo. Shea, did you have something to add? Your hand is up.
Yes, thanks. I just wanted to do a quick comment. Andrew, I love your point. The thing that surprised me is I love that Hub searches the title, the description, so the equivalent of the abstract, as well as the tags to get me as many data layers as I might need. I was surprised that I actually use tags to reduce that number, because when you're searching a description and people put long descriptions up there are a lot of words in the descriptions that don't focus on the actual purpose of the data layer. So Andrew, I love your point, but in this case, I use the tags to narrow down my searches to get rid of the ones that it's pulling abstract. So, and to Jenna's point, we're always working with Esri on their searches, and it's kind of follow what they do.
Thanks, Shea. Before we move on to our next agenda item, does anybody else have any comments or questions related to tags or experiences that they would like to share as far as finding data? I know it's a challenge sometimes.
Jenna, I think it's good to know that to let people know that we are constantly working on tags and trying to find the best way to serve them serve the community in terms of developing tags that are comprehensive and will get you the information that you're desiring. So it's something that we put on the front burner instead of the back burner. So.
Yeah, that's true. Thanks, Kasey. Wolfgang, you turned on your video. Did you have something to add?
Yes, I do. And it's not necessarily tags. Tags are free. It's very nice. And I'm trying to improve and be more clear with my tags. But the categories that we have available on the open data side, I always have a hard time where to put our agency stuff into it. And I find places to put them in those categories. However, I'm not sure that those categories would make sense to our constituents when they're looking for our data. So that's just a general comment. I don't know what the solution is, though.
Maybe there's some guidance we can provide to our data contributors as well as our consumers on if your data is X, it likely fits in, this category, for example. I don't know if that's a feasible way to handle that, but I think that's something to be mindful of. Maybe we can work on a solution collectively. That makes sense.
Much like Shea uses tags to narrow down searches, I use the categories for that. So.
Yeah, I don't think you're alone, Kasey. I've seen a lot of folks do that as well. All right. Is there anything else before we move on? And I think this is the part of our program and our meeting today that everybody's really been looking forward to, right? We want to learn about what you all need and how we can make AZGeo better.